This episode introduces the design journal and gives you a broad overview of what it's about. Later episodes will deal with particular aspects in detail. Assessment for this unit consists of 3 items: the 60% design journal, which is an individual submission, and then 2 projects, which are each worth 20% and are group efforts. Everyone in the group will get the same project mark. So the design journal is pretty important to your success in the unit, and it's also pivotal to record processes that occur for project 1 and project 2 as well. You should download the design journal document by going to Blackboard and clicking on the assessment tab. Within that, you'll see in the table in the top left of the screen a link to the design journal page. There you'll be able to download the design journal document plus the assessment sheet. I'll talk about the assessment sheet later in this episode. Now, the design journal is an A4 bound notebook with blank pages designed for sketching with notes. You must do all your lecture notes for this unit, notes on your readings, practice sketches and design sketches in the block delivery. All of this goes into your design journal. All of it must be handwritten. You're not permitted to add photographs or photocopies or glue in pages from other notebooks or paste in anything into the notebook. All right? Everything must be drawn or sketched or written with your own hand. You will lose marks if you don't follow this guidance. You will actually lose marks and do quite badly because what you paste in won't be counted towards the assessment of the design journal, and you'll also be penalised by 1 whole grade level. So it's pretty important. Now, you're probably thinking, well, this is a bound notebook. It's going to be difficult to keep things straight and organised. Well, the good news is that it doesn't need to be. Neatness is not one of the assessment criteria. We expect a book like this to be inherently messy. We expect that you will have ideas a bit later on and you won't be able to fit them into a particular page that relates to that topic. So it's quite understood that you'll be adding to various pages and adding to sections later on in the book. So what are some ways of helping with this process? Well, we want you to be visual and we want you to use words and images. How can you work in a bound setting for that? Well, one way to do it is to take notes only in the top 2/3 of the page during your lectures. In the bottom 1/3, save that page for later on for revision and reflection on the lecture content. That gives you about 1/3 of the lecture pages for reflection. Another way to do it is to take the lecture notes on one side of the book during class or when you're listening to these podcasts, and then leave the other page blank for reflections. This gives you half of the book free for reflection and additional note-taking. So this may suit you if you feel the need to add to notes extensively afterwards. So both of those formats are quite okay, and they leave you room to add notes afterwards. If you number your pages, you can add notes much further on in the book if you run out of room, and we're completely okay with that happening. We understand when we're working in a bound book that we can't reorder the contents. Ripping pages out and sticking them in will lose you marks. So for example, from the first podcast episode, you might remember this slide talking about the difference between professional designers and private designers, what the design that people do personally. And during that lecture, you might have written a variety of notes in your design journal. And a lot of those might be the words that were on the screen or the words that I was talking, but they might equally have been questions that these words triggered in your own mind. And so these are important things to write down in the design journal. The design journal is really about what you make of the material and how you make it your own. So your insights, your reflection, your comments on what's being discussed is absolutely key to getting a good mark and doing well with the design journal. So writing down these ideas and knowing that you can review the lecture notes later. You can listen to the podcast again later. Should relieve you of some of the pressure to try and capture everything that you're hearing and seeing on the slides. Encourage you to think visually and do doodles and notes to try and illustrate the ideas. This creates a more memorable learning experience, and by trying to diagram out concepts, you'll really absorb them much more deeply, and they'll also generate other ideas. So during that slide about professional designers, you might be doodling pictures of designers and users and clients, people who aren't professional designers. You might be thinking about the questions and the answers that are needed in that kind of exchange of information and that kind of relationship in the design process. And so by thinking of that visually, you'll generate other ways of thinking. So always your question needs to be, how can I visualize that idea? What kind of image or diagram will encapsulate that particular thing? And this is something that I do when I'm preparing the lecture notes and the lectures. I try and create emblematic images that will help you grasp what I'm trying to get across. And if you do that for yourself, if you translate the images I show you into images which are more meaningful for you, you'll find that you absorb the content and actually use it in a much deeper way. Now, what we're talking about here in terms of sketching and drawing is actually called sketch noting. This is a relatively new term. Of course, people have been doodling in their lecture notes for years, but sketch noting is the current term for trying to visualize lecture content and indeed other forms of content. So this is a useful video that you should download and watch, or rather you should watch. It's available on YouTube, and I'll provide the link. This is available on Blackboard and the Facebook page right now. And you'll see that this person is showing how she sketch notes in one of her classes and the kind of personal visual symbology that she's developed to communicate those ideas. It's a very powerful way of thinking and processing information.
Some headings and some important things that you're
So one of the things that you should use sketchnoting for is not just your lecture notes, but also the readings, the variety of readings, and that includes videos and audio recordings, which are available on Blackboard, and you should use these too as material to think about and record in your design journal. And so looking at the design journal document, you can see this is page 3, talking about readings. The design journal document consists of I think around 6 to 8 pages. The first 2 pages merely explain the objectives of the assessment item, when it's due, and the format. And the rest of the document gives you hints and tips on how to get a good mark, basically advice on how to attend to the content that's required. Occasionally in the semester, at the end of the semester, marking design journals, there are submissions which seem like people have just not looked at these notes at all. So I strongly encourage you to make the most of them. Try to make it as clear as possible, and essentially if you follow these guidances and instructions, you'll really do well, and you'll probably get a really good mark for your design journal. So please follow that and take advantage of the guidance. Now, returning to the topic of readings, if you go to Blackboard, click on Learning Resources, and then you'll find the Readings heading. If you click on that, you'll see a collection of videos and a link to the course material database. The videos will usually play on the screen, or of course you can follow them to their original setting and watch them there, perhaps even download them if you have the software to do that. And you should be taking sketch notes of the content there and then reflecting on that content. There's a good variety of material there. Some of it's very entertaining. This is a video of John Cleese talking about creativity. It's reasonably old now, but geez, some of the content's really very useful. I really think it's a really thoughtful piece and well worth watching. Now, the other thing you'll find in the readings is true readings, book chapters and articles, and this is available for download from QUT's course material database. So if you click on course materials for this unit, you'll see this list pop up. Now these are PDF versions of these book chapters, And some of these book chapters will not be available for the duration of the semester. Due to the copyright rules, we're only allowed to make 10% or one chapter of a book available at any one time. So there is a couple of chapters under request for people in other units, and so we're negotiating with them as to which weeks we'll put them in our own particular units. So some of these book chapters may disappear and some of them will be added to later. So my advice is to follow that link and download all of those chapters as soon as you can to make sure that you don't miss out on them. I will notify you of any new chapters that are added to that list, so you should keep an eye on your email and the Facebook updates. Now, in all of this, reflecting on the content, whether it's a book chapter or a video or an audio recording, is an important part of the design journal. So please reflect on that content. Taking good notes of the material is we consider to be easy. It's fairly straightforward to listen and write down a whole collection of words. But reflecting on that and making that content your own, thinking about how it relates to your design process and what it means to you as a novice designer, that's really important. And that's what we're looking for when we look at the design journal. All too often we see a few notes from a reading and nothing of the student, no reflections, no insights gained from that reading. And when we find those kind of situations in the design journal, we're just not able to give very high marks. So please don't put yourself in that situation. Reflect and record your thoughts about the readings in your design journal. Another thing that goes into your design journal is design sketches from the design project. And we'll talk about design projects in later podcasts. Both of these projects will be announced in detail and discussed as the block delivery gets closer. And you'll find them, what you'll need to do working on the project is basically record in the design journal all of your process, all of your thinking, and what you did in your groups and what you built and how well it worked and what you thought of it. And that's a really important part of the design journal. It'll probably take up more than half of the design journal. The other thing we're looking for in the design journal is sketching practice. We want you to become fluid and comfortable with sketching and drawing, and that means that you should experiment with the different kinds of pens and pencils and pastels and paints and whatever you can get your hands on that's reasonably good to use in a kind of external environment, and really push yourself to try different types of drawing. I'll be talking about different types of visual representation in an upcoming podcast, and we'll go into this in a lot more depth. But we do need to see you experimenting with ways of making marks and making images in your page. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is reflections. We're looking for you to reflect on your design journal and on your experiences in the unit, and we want you to think about what you've done. Action without reflection is really a shadow of itself. You'll get the most from the unit if you think about what you've done and what you've learnt about it after the fact. So we think that's really very important. Alright, now let's talk about assessing the design journal. Now, the unit learning outcomes, as we've talked about previously, are visual representation, reflection, design process, and design outcome. Now, we won't be assessing design outcome in the design journal. That will be evaluated as part of Project 1 and Project 2. You'll be recording your design process in the design journal, and that's where we'll be assessing it. Now, the Criteria Reference Assessment Sheet is the tool we use at QUT to assess all assessment work. You should download this from Blackboard and look at it carefully, and I really would encourage you to ask questions during the lectures or via email and on the block delivery, so you understand exactly what it is that we're asking of you. Now, the design journal CRA sheet is structured so that the low marks are on the left and the high marks are on the right. You get a grade of 1 in each of the criteria for free. You don't have to do anything. If you'd like to do better than a failing mark, you actually have to earn it through the activity that you put into the journal. So if we have a look at the descriptors in design process, you can see that we expect you to do a broad range of exploration and highly resolved details in your design projects. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a good record of that in the design journal. Likewise for reflection and also for the visual representation criteria, you can see the kind of things that we're looking for. We're looking for example, all group and individual activities to be considered, discussed, and reflected upon. We're looking for good detailed lecture notes. We're looking for thoughtful reflection on the lecture notes and how it relates to your discipline. And we also want you to do at least 6 readings from the unit Blackboard site and relate that content to your own personal design philosophy, what you think it means for your design process. We'll talk about visual representation a bit later on, but I really would encourage you to read through those details. Now, before we move on from the assessment, let's have a quick look at the penalties. Now you can see here that not using an A4 format will result in a grade penalty. Not handwriting all of the content, any use of photos or paste in will also see you receiving a significant penalty. If you submit loose pages instead of a bound book, you will also receive a penalty. And finally, we won't be marking any journals that are submitted late, and that's according to faculty policy. So that is pretty important, and that is why you'd want to hand in the work a few days early if you can at all manage it. So I can't really emphasize reflection enough. It's key that you talk about, reflect on what happens in the lecture notes and in your experiences, as well as recording good detail about it. So I'll be talking about reflection in a later podcast, and we'll go into different ways and times to do reflection, but it is a crucial part of this unit. So remember to download the document from Blackboard and read all of it, please. And it's the kind of thing, in general, it's good advice to read your assessment documents, not just at the beginning of the assessment, but periodically as it progresses. And always make an effort to reread the assessment document a couple of days before your final submission. It's not at all unusual for students to forget really important, simple points, simply because they focused on attending to other objectives in the assessment item, and they forget a couple of crucial ones. So if you keep reading that periodically as you work your way through the design journal, it will really help you. And of course, make good use of the learning resource page, frequently asked questions, and that should keep you on track and doing the right thing towards getting a great mark in the design journal when you submit it at the end of week 8. So a future podcast will go into more detail about all of these aspects for the design journal and give you a deeper understanding of what it is we expect of you. All right, thank you.